Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to take this cold finished piece of 1084 and we're going to surface grind both sides of it. We're going to show you the kind of finish, what you can expect out of the machine now that we've made some changes in it. So I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to start right off with truing my chuck up. So I'm going to do a light grind of my chuck. I don't normally do that because once I'm set up, it's pretty well good for quite some time. What I do is I leave, you can see over here, I put a little red mark here in the middle and there, and then I just take it up. Now that when you're doing this, make sure this is tight. In fact, loosen this up, make sure. Okay, we're going to show you how to take and grind, surface grind a piece of, this is a piece of 1.5 inch by about 1084, cold roll finish on it, and we're going to flatten this up and make it parallel and show you what kind of surface finish we can expect. Now the first thing we're going to do is true our chuck. I normally don't do this, but just to show you the process, I'm going to walk you through it. Open it up and blow this out. So you make sure that that is clean. Okay, the first thing you want to do is make sure that's good and clean in there. Pull it down and tighten this up. That should be 0 for a 5-inch sign that rocks this table. I snug it down pretty good. Then I back off both of these, pull that away. I clean this pin, I clean this face here. And now I pull it back. The first thing I do is I lock this lever. When I pivot it this way, it's going to tend to load it this way, and that's what I want. Tighten that up, and then I tighten this up. Now we should be in neutral position on our surface grinder now, both on the 8-inch sign, which is this one, and the 5-inch sign, which is this one. So now we're going to fire the machine up. We're going to take a very light cut. Shouldn't take much.
We've marked it at each end and in the middle.
I set this, I barely touched it, then I backed it off. I've got my indicator set up here. I'm going to go in a couple of thousandths, no cut, couple more. All right, I'm taking just a light cut with that. I'm going to go one more. Okay, it's just got a little red just right on the bottom here. So I'm going to go in another thousandth. I'm going to zero out. Okay, I've cleaned that off. This is a 80 grit belt. I'm going to take this off.
What belt grit did you go to?
I'm going to a 120. I had an 80 on it.
You're doing a 120 to finish the chuck? Or
just to finish, give a little smoother finish on the chuck. Okay, I'm going to mark the chuck. All right. You can okay. I bring this up till it touches. I can tell by when my wheel starts to rotate. All right. I'm going to zero out here, and I'm going to back off 5 thousandths so it's not touching. fire it up again. I'm going to feed back in a couple. Not getting anything. Feed back in a couple more. Nothing. I'm going to go down one. One more. I think I feel it's starting to hit. Pretty well took it off. Go in one more. Taking one more 1,000. But I got a little red dicom, or a little red marks a lot on the bottom on the right side of the chuck. Still got a little tiny bit there, but that's good enough. I'm not going to cut my chuck any deeper to get rid of that. These chucks ought to last a long time because you don't have to finish, you don't have to do what I'm doing very often. Now I'm going to traverse my belt up and down. I'm going to bring the belt up so I'm giving it a new surface to go across. So if there's any high points in my belt, I don't feel anything. So now I'm going to go the other way. My belt apparently has a little bit of thickness. It's a little thicker on one edge than the other. Because I got a little bitty cut when I move my belt up and down. So I'm going to move it back to the middle. Blow my chuck off. Well, I cut the air off, but I think I got enough left here. All right, first thing I do, put my piece of metal up against the chuck and slide the first magnet in. Now I already checked that a minute ago, and that my piece is flat. Sometimes you get, when you're forging, you get a hump, and that's when you put a magnet in either side and a feeler gauge. I can't do that for you because this is flat enough that I haven't got any room for a feeler gauge. What you do is you put a magnet on this end and a magnet on this end, put a feeler gauge in here, whatever feeler gauge takes up the room, then put a magnet next to the feeler gauge and surface that side. Then when you flip it over, you're going to have flat and parallel. And what I'm going to do now is just put the other two magnets. I usually use 3 magnets. I don't usually like to have anybody standing over here to the right of the machine while I'm using it. Actually, I surface grind so that anything would come off would end up hitting my oven over there. We're going to open this up until I get no movement on that. And we're going to take and put my 80 grit belt back on. It's hot in here. We've got our air conditioner turned off because the noise the air conditioner makes drowns out our audio. Might be a good thing with me talking. Okay. I'm zeroed out here. I'm going to go in 2. Get no cut. I'm going to go in 2 more. Nothing. I'll go in 2 more. Picking up a little bit. I'm going to go in one more. Just make some lines across it. Makes it a little easier to see when you've done on that surface of this belt. I'm going to go in another one. You can see it's just the high and low part of the piece of cold roll. Cold roll normally is a little thicker in the middle than it is on the side. So I'm re-zeroing. I'm going to run one more. I'm going to go in one more. Zero my pretty well clean across. I got a little up and down mark here, so I'm going to go in one more. Yeah, it's still a little low on there. Now I'm using an 80 grit belt. If I had a piece of, if I'd have done Damascus or something, or I had some real rough material, I'd start out with a 36 and I'd knock it down. Now the other thing is you want to use sharp belts on this. If you get a dull belt on this trying to save money with the belt, you're going to be working for a long time to get a nice clean cut. So new belts are a must on this. Okay, I've got that cleaned off. Okay, that's 120. Okay, we put a 220 belt on. I'm going to bring it up until it touches right there. I'm going to re-zero. And I'm going to back off 5. You can feel it hitting. I'm going to make a couple of marks here. That took all of the red marks away. I'm only 1/1000 deep into it. I haven't been doing what I normally do just because I'm on camera and I should be doing it. This is a gum stick. And this makes all the difference in the world if you'll take this and just after you take a few cuts, take that gum stick and take the grit out of the belt. I should have been doing it on the first two. They're brand new belts, so I wasn't too worried about it. But that just cleaned what little grit was stuck in that 220. I can tell by the pressure I'm putting against it how deep that cut is. pretty shallow. But what's happened is that's a 90 durometer wheel. That belt is actually pushing back into that wheel on each cut. I'm going to change to a 400 grit belt now. It's already touching, so I'm going to back it off a couple. There's right. I'm going to re-zero. Fire this up. Now I can tell that that's barely hitting. And I don't want to try and force that because it's a fine belt. I don't want to force it. Take a heavy cut with it because then you won't. I just want to be knocking the scratches out of it. I don't want to be removing hardly any metal at all. If I put a lot of pressure on that, it's just going to push the belt in and make it narrower on the edge than it is. Okay, I'm going to go in just a little bit. Half a thousandths. Can you get a picture of those waves? Those are the tracks that I've been talking about. Now you still get those when you're just doing it with a 90 durometer wheel. You just can't avoid it. Now I'm going to slow down. Now the way you can get away from it is put a softer wheel on it. There's another thing you can do about that. And that is, after I get done, shut it off, hold the wheel, and push this in about a thousandth. Then I hold the wheel. I rotate it, slow it slightly. Okay, can you see that surface? Can you get a view of that? All right, I use a screwdriver to knock these magnets out. I talked my way through the last one. I'm doing the exact same thing this time to the second side. Now, a lot of times you don't have to put a beautiful finish, but you can get one, and I'll show you how to do that on this second side. You can see that the middle is low on this because this piece of cold roll is cupped. We're going to get rid of that. Okay, that's cleaned off. If I'm doing a whole bunch of metal, I do one side, one grit, and then I move to the next piece, and the next piece, and the next piece, and then I'll go to the next belt down and bring them smooth with that belt, just to keep from having to change the belts back and forth if I'm doing a whole bunch of parts. Okay. Okay, that was a 80 grit belt. A lot of times I'll use a 60 for that operation. I guess I just grabbed the 80 here. I'm going in 2/1000ths at a time till I touch. And I just touch. It pretty well wipes those marks away. We'll go one more. I'm going to 240 now. Feed it in till it touches, because this belt's much finer than the other belt. You don't have to do this. I like to, it just gives me an idea. I'm going to go in a 1/2,000ths here. Backed it off so I'm not taking a cut across the back side. Not too important until you get to the finer belts. Okay, I'm going to bring this up till it barely touches. starting to touch right there. I'm going to back it out about a couple of thousandths. Clean my belt. Going another thousandths. After a while you get a kind of a feel for what the different belts feel like and the depth you need to go on them. If you're confused, just go to a shallower depth. Now the one thing I do is I'll slow this way down. I'll stop it. Now I'll do the same thing. I can put my finish on. Now this is not necessary most of the time, but if you want to go to a polish, then I'd recommend doing this. Just putting it on and sliding it back and forth. That takes any of the remaining eccentricity out and makes it. The other thing you can do is if you're not polishing it and you want to put a grain finish on it, now is the time. You can see they're no longer what I'd call tracks. But there are little surface undulations there. It can't be more than 1/10 of a thousandth deep. So I'll do the same thing. I'm going to feed it in a little bit more. Now this is the piece we just pulled off over there. Battery ran down in our little camera, so we had to stop. We moved the equipment back. But here is that piece now. 173.5, 173.5, 173.7, 173.3, 174, let me move it in a little bit, 173.8, 73.5, 73.5, let me go in the middle here, 173.2. So we're closer than a thousandths on parallelism there. I'm just tapping on the corners. And you can feel movement, even a thousandth or two, you can feel it. Not getting any movement on it, so that means it's nice and flat. The better way to do that is to use an indicator on a surface plate. But when you're doing a knife, you don't need flat within 1/10 or 2. When you're building a folder, you need it parallel, but you only need it parallel over a little distance. What you're primarily, if you're doing a Bowie knife or something larger, you're primarily interested in what kind of finish you're getting across there. And you can see this is what we got with the 4-inch wheel. Okay, and that's a ground 4-inch wheel. Now, I probably shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. This is how I set my grinder up at home. Now, I know I'm going to get some people say, well, why do we do, you know? We do it that way because a 4-inch 90 durometer wheel is the best general purpose wheel you can have. In other words, if you're grinding, if you're forging things and you're rough grinding them and you got to take a lot of metal off, then a 90 durometer wheel is what you've got to go to. If you're once you get looking for really fine finishes, then I soft up to a 70 durometer wheel, which is what this is. The other thing I like about a 70, our phone's ringing, about the other wheel is a bigger wheel, approach angle to the work is far less than a small wheel. Now, I can't get 90, I haven't been able to find 90 durometer wheels that are 2.2 wide, so that's another reason why we use the 90 durometer wheel. The other thing is, these are pretty expensive, and if I'm going to precision grind this, I'll do it for $100, but I don't really like to do it for $100 because it takes me a long time to grind a wheel like this really close. I will, and I put that price on it. Okay, where are my, oh, I moved them over here. So this is the setup that I use at my home. Do I use the 4-inch wheel? No, and the reason I don't use the 4-inch wheel, again, I shouldn't have said that. The reason I don't use the 4-inch wheel is I don't do any rough grinding. If I'm working with cold finish material, I only got to take a couple of thousandths off. And this 70 durometer wheel just works fine for that. But as a general purpose wheel across the board for everything you might want to do, the 4-inch 90 durometer wheel is the best bet. Now, I did not grind this chuck in with this wheel. I just did it over there with the 4-inch wheel, which means, is it possible that this wheel will not connect, will not be perfectly parallel when I try to touch this surface? Entirely possible. We're going to find out. If I was using a 120 wheel on there, I would grind, I can almost guarantee you it would grind in. I've just touched the wheel and I backed out a couple of thousandths. Just going in a thousandths at a time till I feel it hit. So you can see where I'm touching right at the bottom of the work because I did not grind that chuck in with this piece. What I'll do later is I'll go back in and regrind my chuck with this wheel because it's the one I use all the time. See, I'm barely cleaning up here, still got a little left here.
looks smooth from here.
Okay, the last thing I'm going to do, slow it way down. Clean my belt up. Okay, let's pull it off. See how much slope there is to it since I used a different wheel to do a finished grind. There's the finish with the big wheel. You can see it didn't quite clean up there, the shine. But the big wheel actually takes those undulations. Let me mic it, just see how much difference there is. Well, get much difference here. It was 173 to 174. It's 173, 172 and a half, 72 and a half, 173 and a half. That's at 174, 173. And the difference is, I pulled this off the chuck one time, and this wheel obviously is sloped to thousandths. And later on I'll go on and refinish my chuck, and that'll put me right back on the money. But you can see, here's that finish off the 4-inch wheel. There's the finish I'm getting off the 10-inch wheel. This is little area right here is still off the 4-inch wheel. But you can see you get better with the smaller approach angle here. And I'm still working on this. I think we can even still make some improvements. I know that if I want to polish this, I'll go to my 4-inch 40 durometer wheel. And I barely touch it. And I have to run it real slow, because if you run the speed up at all on these, they'll explode. They'll just melt away. If you get any heat in them, they'll melt away. So if you just want to barely touch it, and this is soft enough that it lets the belt compress into it, and it'll give you a little better finish than a 70 durometer wheel. Can you think anything more, Greg?
No.
All right. Undoubtedly, as we go through this, I'll show you some other things that I do, and we'll probably get some notification from some of our customers as to what they do with it. I don't forge, so I don't have any need to rough grind, and that's what I showed you in the beginning with over there, how you can still get a really good finish with this 4-inch precision ground wheel, but obviously you could get a better finish with a precision ground 14-inch wheel. Now, is it necessary? Probably not 99% of the time, but those are the possibilities with the machines that I've come across. Thanks to Josh, for one thing, for getting me started on this whole process. Otherwise, I would have accepted what we had as good, and we would have that would have been it. Okay, have you got anything, Greg?
Nope, we're good.
All righty, bye-bye.
Thank you.